How's it going, everybody? I hope you can hear me. Warden, you want to join me up here? How's it going, Warden? Can you speak, Warden? So today we're doing a little bit different. We're still getting picked up. We're still picking up with, I guess, the marketing and stuff. So um, we definitely need to also shift the date we do this. I think it needs to be midweek sometime. Nobody wants to spend their weekends learning about tokenization and automation, which is fair. It's fair. Warden, can you hear me? Wow, giving me the cold shoulder, eh, Warden? Well, anyways, what you guys are seeing here is a Galton board. So this thing here is what you call a Galton board. What it demonstrates is this principle of emergence, this kind of the emergence of this normal distribution. If you look down here, as we get towards the end, what forms by this process of these balls basically falling through this hole and then having a 50-50 chance at every pin of either going left or right, what ends up emerging is this kind of bell curve where most of the balls that fall through end up in the center. Oh, who's this? Who's Jahan? You want to join us up here, John? Who are you? Oh, dang. Is this Bon Joy? Wow. Sound like he was playing a flute of some kind, maybe. But yeah, so you get this kind of bell curve that forms. And this is what we want to discuss when it comes to point two. So instead of doing our typical seminar, which you can catch the first episode of this from last week where we go over kind of the fundamentals. Today we're going to dive into point two a little more. What does this bell curve mean? And why are we so obsessed with it here at the utility company? And so if you kind of look through this process, what happens if you watch it very carefully is that random chance leads to this emergence of some type of structure, right? And there needs to be somewhat structure embedded all along. But as long as the pins are properly spaced and these bins are properly spaced, the random act of these of physics ends up becoming distributed. Like if the ball's falling through here and bouncing about, they end up following. Like you can kind of track probabilistically where they were to approach or where they were to fall. So if you were to pick any random ball, you could set a percentage probability that it would probably end up here, right? Like it looks like to this point, maybe you can say, to like just here, you have maybe 60% of all the balls that fell through the top. If you go further out, so you can say with 60% probability that any of these balls will probably end up within these three bins, right? And now if you imagine this being associated with the first kind of equation that we've spoken about, that we've tried to define, which is a master work function. If you imagine that this journey across all these pins being the completion of a task, right, that requires a certain amount of work, and this ball is you, each one of these balls is you falling across these pins trying to complete a task, and each pin is a subtask, right? And for every subtask, you have the decision, you have the choice of either automating it or doing it yourself. Right, let's just stick to this simple 50-50. So as you hit this first pin, let's say your task is to, let's say, write a letter and send it off to a friend, right? And you need to break that down into a bunch of subtasks. The end goal is send a letter to a friend, right? Now, whether you will do that in a completely automated way or in a, all by yourself, that is kind of what we're playing out here. And when you realize that when there are more than just one kind of when there's more than one step involved, right? Like in order to send that mail to your friend, that letter to your friend, you first need to go and get some paper, and then you need to write on that paper, or you need to decide. Like first, the first decision is what is the medium for that letter, right? If you decide to go with you know, digital, right? It's just like an email. That's more on the automation side, right? So the actual work of cutting a tree and then shaping it into a piece of paper and then making sure it's smooth and bleached and everything so you can write on it. All that is automated for you, or it just disappears essentially. And instead, what you have is this digital representation. So that's where you decided instead of going with something that was less automated, you know, you went with something that's even more so automated, where even the generation of the actual paper that you print on, or in this case, the screen, it's pixels that are just moving really rapidly across and kind of sketching across that display over and over again. Whereas on the other side, you would have to involve some human to actually go, or maybe some machination to go and cut down a tree. Um, we got first decision. What's the medium? So you choose digital. Second is, do you type it yourself, or do you get your do you use GPT to write it up, right? And there, let's say you want to type it yourself. So then you start typing it out. You write up the whole letter all on your own. But now you want to decide, how do you want to package it? Do you want to save it as a Word file? Do you want to just put it straight into the email, copy and paste? Or do you want to like maybe create some kind of like even within the digital, right? Do you want to make some type of stationery? Do you want to create it into turn it into a PDF? So you're gonna have that decision, like, okay, it's done now. I want to decorate or I don't want to decorate it. Let's say you want to decorate it, right? That means there's a human decision. You don't want to decorate. That's already automated, right? You move forward, but you want to decorate it, make it look a little special. That leads you to the next decision. How so? Right? Again, in that moment, you can decide to give it to GPT, feed your letter to GPT, and GPT is pretty. It's okay at those at times, and ask it to basically create some type of aesthetically pleasing stationery for you, and then export the letter as a PDF. It'll do that for you. It's capable of doing this. And so, or you can say, you know what, I'm going to open up Photoshop or Figma or Canva or whatever, or any of these kind of design softwares, and I'm going to design that stationery on my own, right? Even though it's digital and there are even additional kind of components of automation involved on both ends, whether the human is involved in it as much or not is kind of what it comes down to. And if you keep doing that, and for every task, you break it into these subtasks, and on every step, at every step, you decide whether you want a human involved or not. What you'll end up is with most people following in the middle, right? There are going to be some tasks for which they want to automate, and there are going to be some tasks which they want to do themselves. And there are going to be very few that are more than willing to just throw GPT that letter. They don't care about that friend. That friend don't matter to them. So they're just going to get GPT to write them a damn letter and send it and not care. And that's fully automated. Every time the ball hit the pin, it just went, do you want to, what's your medium? Don't care. Automate, 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 and boom, it ends up here. Almost very unlikely, right? And then the other side is a human. Like, I'm gonna go and cut down the tree, and I'm gonna actually shape the wood, and then bleach the paper, and then find a squid to juice for ink, and then fill it into a little vial, and then blah blah blah. And that's over on this side. Someone who's gonna write that letter with every component of it forged by hand through some human process. That's just as unlikely. I think most people will fall here in the center. So that's what we want everybody to start thinking about when you think about automating your business. Is automating your business is not just about automating one specific task, right? It's not automating just one set of these pin, like one trajectory along these pins. It's setting up this whole Galton board, right? That's what automation is about in your industry, in your specific field. Setting up the Galton board so that all the people that enter into your ecosystem, they find the place where they want to be. They can move along these pins and find the bin in which they belong. Right? And we're going to play that one more time. So this is random, right? Gravity takes over, balls start to fall through the hole, and what emerges by random chance, right? This can be skewed if I shift the density of these pins around, right? That will lead to that bell curve being more over on this side, kind of skewed over to the left or the right. And so you can make that determination. Like we do that at the utility company. When we, for example, set a default, like when Bhagesh makes a recommendation in terms of, for a specific strain, what should the humidity be set to? What you have is a skewed distribution. You're going to more likely, because you're picking that default, this bell curve will slightly shift to the left, right? Where you're going to just pick that automated, decision every time because it's been set, it's shown to you as a default what in the interface. And so we can do that to kind of, manipulate the way these pins are arranged. And then by that case, skew this distribution. But we have to be careful when we do that, right? Because then what if every time you just want that default now? Um, and we can't deliver it. There's a supply chain issue, or maybe it's just not that marketable anymore. Like we have this component of actually distributing these goods, right? So when you consider all of that, you want to try to make sure that your distribution stays normally distributed. It doesn't get too heavily skewed. And that's essentially where point three comes in. And actually, I had this really interesting chart. So we're just going to type in data compute chart. You're going to kind of go on this um, journey with me, data versus compute. And damn it, sometimes I can find it, sometimes I can't. This is the brilliance of it's basically a hyperbolic relationship, right? So if you go to uh, Desmos, right? Classic graphing calculator. Everybody knows Desmos. I don't want to sign in. Just take me to the damn graphing calculator. Okay, so we're going to go y is equal to 1 over x. What forms here is this wonderful hyperbola, right? We're going to bound it to just the first quadrant. Some classic algebra for everybody, right? Algebra and a little bit of plotting geometry, etc. But if you look here, if you were to imagine this y-axis being set to, can I label? I believe I can label in Desmos. Desmos. Why don't we look that up? How to label axes in Desmos. We're gonna learn together. Click on the wrench to open the graph settings. Okay. Ah, nice. So we're gonna set this to mobility. We're gonna set this to memory. Right. And yeah, hope that the bright mode isn't too bad. So now if you were to, I wish I could kind of normalize this to, yeah, 0 to 1. 0 to 1. Let's do 100. Okay. So now if you imagine, that's not good either. Maybe 10. 0 to 10. Okay. So if you imagine 10 being 100% memory and 10 on this side being 100% mobility, right? So if you have your memory full, and think about this in terms of your computer, and like for those of you who know kind of basic computing, you have your random access memory or your RAM. If your RAM is full, or even if all your storage, right, all the memory on your computer is full, what happens to your computer? Does it go? Does it run? Probably not, right? It's sluggish. It's slow. It's hard to compute when you have all that memory clogging up all of your memory storage, right? Like your processor is going to have to work through all those data points and compute on that. It's going to take it time. The other side, and so it's mobility. If you want to consider that instead of compute, you can even consider it, or instead of yeah, compute, you can consider mobility, right? So how much is your system able to move? If it has a lot of memory in it, it's not going to be able to move too much. And you can even think about this in natural ways. Like, anybody want to come up with some metaphysical example for this? Post it in the Discord, you'll get some points. I've talked about this before. So instead of compute or memory or something, think of something metaphysical. Yeah. How can you attribute this to something, like, more generally, to things around you, not just like computers? I'll let, if anybody wants to throw it in chat or something. I don't even know if I'm watching chat. Okay, cool. I got someone on Twitch saying, "Hello, homie. You stream pretty cool. The entertainment you bring is top notch. I'd like to be a friend, a fan, and a friend. If you feel the same and you don't mind, let's talk on Discord." Cool, buddy. Appreciate it. Hop on the Discord. Hop in the Discord. Would love to talk to you. Um, but yeah, okay. So if you think of something like even a rock, right? When you look at a rock is kind of, in its own form, all memory, right? It's actually expressing everything that it's interacted with, every kind of curve on it, scrape on it, dent, even if it's smooth, that is a reflection of everything it's been through, right? Every interaction it's had, every time it got tumbled over some dirt, every time the wind scraped over it, every time the water flowed over it. And so, in order for that rock to sit there and be a rock and express to you in its structural form all of the history, right? In its form as it stands is the memory of everything it interacted with. And that's why it's a rock. It has almost no mobility, right? Now, the other end, you can think of something like wind, right? Wind, as it moves into a space, it adopts this, the conformation, the figure of that space. But then as soon as it's out of it, it's, that it doesn't retain much of that space. It continues to flow into the next and the next. And so wind has incredible mobility. It retains almost no memory of its interactions, right? You can't ever look, like try to capture, if you could somehow, you know, the position of all the different molecules in air, right? In like a breeze, like oxygen, nitrogen, carbon. If you could capture all their positions, and see a specific state of the wind and where all those particles are, in no way could you kind of determine from where they came, right? Or with very little probability could you actually determine all the interactions that they had along the way to kind of reach that specific position, right? And so that's kind of the difference here. And as a company, now breaking away from the metaphysical, as a company, as an automated system, even you as an individual, I think we fare well when we operate at this kind of apex, right, where we have just enough memory to, have just enough mobility, like that sweet spot, and we kind of you can consider that kind of like this flow state, right? In fact, sometimes it's so efficient, that you kind of like, when they talk about things like orchestrated objective reduction or other types of like consciousness and stuff, like how consciousness may emerge as a physical phenomenon. Flow state comes into play because you could have a human being, like a professional tennis player, capable of reacting at speeds that are far, quicker than what we can actually process, from what we know of, like the speed of like neural processing to be, right? And so that sweet spot's that flow state. And if you start breaking away from that, so if you as an individual, um, start accruing a lot of memory, right? Like you maybe, in a flow state, came up with some brilliant plan, some nice business plan. And now you start, getting out there in the world and you start talking about it. Well, every time that business plan that, you as an institution, along with this idea you had, every time it encounters rejection or literally anything, right? Every time it sends out an email, cold calls, it's going to build up a memory of interactions, right? Over time. And if like you pitch to one person and they like it, they reject you, blah blah. I mean, it could be you only pitch to the first person agrees. Now you're back into your flow state. You got the capital you need, and you keep going. But more likely than not, you're gonna have to spend some energy, accrue some memory of all these VCs and all these different funds and grants and crowdfunding mechanisms, blah blah blah, in order to be able to kind of continue to be in that flow state. And if you keep doing that too far and too long, eventually, maybe like you just keep getting rejected, right? And you have to keep searching and searching. At that point, maybe you realize that flow state wasn't worth it, or you just get so traumatized by the whole experience, you give up and become apathetic, right? You become a rock or you become ice. And so it's important to kind of make sure that, okay, I tried for 6 months, 7 months. I've stopped being able to provide as much energy to that flow spot, that flow state, point here. And I'm just constantly emailing VCs and, cold calling and spending time in Silicon Valley, living off of Soylent. Well, maybe it's time to kind of give that up and come back to equilibrium. Enter that flow state and see what it gives you. Maybe it'll give you a different product. Maybe it'll allow you to innovate on your core product so you don't need that capital and you can still continue to operate, which is always a possibility, right? You can just learn more and you can build more. And then the same thing goes if you go the other way, right? Let's say you're in that flow state and now you don't really care about anybody and anything around you, and you just keep creating stuff and making stuff. And over time, if what you're making is so easy and so fast that you're just constantly mobile and there's no memory of even what you did last week or what you did an hour ago, at that point, whatever you're producing is probably just as meaningless enough to where anybody could do it, right? Or it's just it's so simple that it's almost not worth your energy partaking in that. Because if no memory is required, if you don't need to build up any memory in order to do something, then you can assume that almost anybody around you should be able to do the same, right? They don't need to go learn anything to do it. And it may take time, right? But if you really get into this area, right, because you're learning to do something and then doing it consistently, that's this area. But if you're just doing, like if I'm just sitting there all day, just I got one prompt given to me by my boss, and I'm just hitting enter, and just generating, and I don't even care about what's happening, like at some point I'm gonna have to retain what's good, what's not, right? I'm gonna have to kind of come back to this point, find the one that works, whatever that generation that works well enough for my boss to pass his standards. Otherwise, I'll probably get fired, or you just disappear. You become wind, right? I don't know. Actually, I do know. I think that's what essentially it's kind of like. So you can swing amongst this kind of spectrum as an individual. And if you start breaking away from this equilibrium point, you need to have mechanisms that allow you to kind of swing back and stay within a very comfortable range of that flow state. And this is what I think we're all heading towards over the course of the next 5-10 years. Every generation, every background, every creed, it doesn't matter. We're not talking about anything that's specific to any culture or religion or ethnicity or anything like that. This is just, I think, fundamental kind of common sense. And if we have this kind of common sense and the ability to track this, in a common way, in like a common sense way, right? Like even right now, this is too much. This is too much of an instrument to kind of demonstrate this with, right? I think we need to have more tangible, simulations, like maybe something like The Sims, like Sims Business or something, where you can see the business kind of as it is operating here with the perfect automation, seeing those, like in the Galton board, customers come into the store, engage with the business, get a certain outcome. And then let's say something, you make a small tweak in the print process, and now all of a sudden the print isn't drying on time by the time it's delivered to your customer, and it's smearing. Or you're going to start seeing the business accrue, in the simulation, customer complaints. And then you're going to see employees have to dedicate their time away from, just continuously outputting at that flow state to addressing those complaints. And if you can do it in a simulation, you can do it in real life. And you do it in real life by tokenizing things. Do it in real life And by tokenizing, I don't mean by selling tokens. Tokenizing events and like when you create a token for something, you give it an identity, right? So same thing with an event in your business. When someone files that complaint, it should be that token should be or that complaint should be assigned a token, and that token is time stamped. It has some basic data that needs to be maintained, um, you know, regarding the complaint and such for that token to be registered. And if those tokens accrue, as you can imagine, that equates to the memory accruing, right? If those tokens aren't there, then you're kind of in this flow state. And it depends. Like there could be tokens in the other case, like in terms of products. Every time you sell a product, there's a token attached to each product, you know, and that may, give you a different kind of positioning along this distribution. So we're going to be creating some more interesting kind of visuals to show this. Like we go back to the Galton board real quick because I love that thing. It looks pretty cool. Wikipedia has a beautiful free version of it. This is the nicest animation I've found. Kudos to Wikipedia for finding this beautiful animation. We can even slow it down. Look at that. Can we? That is something really to slow it down. Maybe not. Well, anyways, you can loop it so you can just kind of see it playing. So this is what we want to build. We want to build in every industry the Galton board, and then make it to where anybody and whoever comes into the industry, comes into our experience, is able to find their place within it comfortably with very little friction. Right. So that's what this seminar is about. And that's what everybody should be doing. If you have a business, think about how your business can be this Galton board. What is the task that you want to accomplish? And what are the different pathways by which that task can be accomplished? And then setting it up in a way where people can choose to traverse it the way they want. That is what automation is really about. That's what autonomy is even about. So this is where automation, autonomous, self-regulation or autonomous kind of operation, agency, access, all of these things come together and they intersect. And that is what we think the business of the future is. A future that is considering all of these things and how they intersect, and then catering to more than just a customer, right? We want to work with you. Whatever our system is, it should be that system that you default to when you don't want to do all the hard work, right? But at the same time, if you want to spend that extra kind of hour on a painting you're working on to give it that perfect detail, or add a layer of something super generative, and algorithmic and computationally perfect, bring in the automation, have it like look at your image and draw over it some type of geometric design using CAD, G code, and moving around some type of gantry based robotics or something. But yeah, if you have any questions or anything, hop in our Discord, and you can always follow and DM us on Twitter, Facebook. We're currently live on Twitch, YouTube, all that. So thank you everybody for watching. We got 19 people, which is awesome. Really appreciate everybody hanging out. Next week we hopefully will be back to the seminar room. It's there. I just didn't want to go up and set up everything for nobody showing up today, but yeah, things will change. Plus, Saturday's not the greatest day because the gate is closed. I feel like we had a couple people that drove by, but they saw the gate is closed, and that's why you can't have anything that creates kind of friction. You need to make it as smooth and accessible as possible. Otherwise, people give up, is essentially what happens. So don't give up. Keep trying. Sometimes the gate's going to be closed. Ring that bell. Make that call. Send a DM. Try to get it open. It's worth the effort. All right, guys. Have a good day. Later. See you next week.